You know I love to get the look with what I have, but in the last few weeks there have been a lot of fabulous new releases paired with some really great sales, and I've had a hard time holding back. Today, I'm sharing 4 examples of how I recently resisted specific products, as well as 2 simple questions that you can ask yourself before you add any amazing new product to your cart. And when you're finished here, Justine and Laurel are also sharing their thoughts on this tough craft room issue. I've put my examples into categories because I really don't want you to focus on the products I did or didn't buy. All the products I'm talking about here are high quality from excellent companies. I really want you to focus on the thought process so that you can use it when you're looking at new releases. Recently, Honeybee Stamps released this new Happy cover plate die. This kind of die is amazing for creating cards quickly with precision. But cover plates are also one of our more expensive purchases. Over the years, I've collected a number of alphabet die sets. I love to use them to personalize cards with names or messages. For this card, I chose this Hutson Classic Block Alpha for 2 reasons. First, I know I can fit the word happy on a standard panel of cardstock. And second, take a close look. I have 2 of every letter except Y. A couple of years ago, I lost the Y from my first alphabet. And without Y, you can't make merry or happy or joy. I figured buying another alphabet would help me find the lost Y, because that's how things work for me, but I still haven't found it. But now I have 2 of all the other letters, and that makes this alphabet really easy to work with. By putting my panel up against my alphabet, I can quickly estimate that I'll be able to fit 5 happies on this panel. I find the best way to work with an alphabet is to line up my letters on a grid work surface like this one. If you don't have 2 P's in your alphabet, you can put an R in this space as a placeholder. Now, I agree it's a bit fiddly to line these up properly, but one of the advantages of using an alphabet rather than a cover plate die like this is that I could be doing Mary or a recipient's name with this method instead. Once you've got the letters aligned, pick them up with a piece of tape. Now you've created a temporary word die. If you're using the R as a placeholder, remove it before you start die cutting. Next, I placed my word die in the center of the panel and I ran it through my die cutting machine. To get even spacing, I then moved to the top of my panel. I made sure that the letters were lined up vertically as best as I could, and then I cut those out. Next, I could just place the word in between the 2 that were already cut out to get it centered. This is my no-measure way of spacing them out, but of course you could measure it all if you want more precision. You could blend ink on your panel before you start if you want color. Don't forget that as you're creating this faux cover plate look, you're going to end up with 5 sets of happy letters, and I wanted mine to be white for future projects, so I left the panel white as well. Now that I can see how far to space it, I did one immediately before the center word and finally the bottom one. If you don't have a second P, you'll now have to go back and cut the P out 5 more times to finish the panel. To finish this faux cover plate card, I created a striped panel with my Catherine Pooler mini inks, just direct to paper, and I layered my cutout panel over top. I trimmed down one of my leftover Happy Birthday sentiment strips from a previous video, and I adhered it on top and added lots of sparkle with a few colors of Crafty Meraki gems. I love this new waffle flower cover plate die and matching stencil. I've seen some amazing inspiration using these goodies online, but when they were released, I had literally just received these 2 cover plates from Catherine Pooler. You know I love geometric designs, and I wondered if I could get a similar look with what I already have. I started with the one with the diamonds on it, and I ran it through my die cutting machine. I want this panel to mimic the stitching from the waffle flower cover plate, so I want all the pieces to stay together. You could emboss it rather than cutting it if you prefer. Then I ran the other one through my die cutting machine, and this one's going to stand in for the stencil. I used some tape to hold the diamond pieces in place to make it act like one panel, and again, embossing this rather than cutting would work just as well. Then I popped out all the little pieces from the stencil piece, and I'll hold on to those for a future project. I'm using a water media mat to hold my 2 panels in place right on top of each other, and then I blended my inks through. I've got 2 colors of green, 2 blues, and 2 indigos, all from Catherine Pooler. I'm really crushing on this cool color combination lately, so you may be seeing it quite a bit. When I got to the bottom, I moved the panels up to the top corner so I could ink right down over that bottom edge. So that's a nice kind of argyle look, but one of the features of the waffle flower stencil is that you can shift it to fill in the spaces with more diamonds. I gave it a try by shifting the stencil up first and masking off the bottom where there were half diamonds in the pattern, and where the bottom panel was exposed because I don't want any ink on there quite yet. Then I added the colors again, one by one, working down to my mask. I removed the mask and I shifted the stencil so it was lined up to allow me to finish the panel. This time I added the tape at the top just to help me hold this stencil in place. I love how the stitching peeks through the blended diamonds. I finished this card with Catherine's Big Thanks stamp set and some more Crafty Meraki gems. And of course I had this stencil, which is a nice 2-for-1 technique, and I added a popped up inlaid Round of Thanks die cut along with some more gems. Recently, Simon Hurley and Catherine Pooler came out with products with a similar pattern. Simon's is a background stamp and Catherine's is a cover plate. I love this pattern, but I didn't need both of them. With a background stamp, you can of course stamp it with colored inks. You can also heat emboss it, then blend ink over it to get a reverse pattern. You can get the same 2 looks with a cover plate by using the stencil technique I just used on my previous card. I started by cutting the die from white cardstock and using my tool-in-one to push out most of the tiny pieces and a paper piercer to get the rest out. Then I grabbed my water media mat and I did the exact same thing that I did before. I blended the ink through. I put yellow down in the centers of each little starburst and then finished with pink over top of the whole thing. And of course I ended up with 2 panels. Since I love to make 4¼ inch square cards, I had these extra little pieces and I thought it would be fun to use a circle die to cut out each pattern. This isn't exactly the same as the really cool pull-apart feature that Simon's background stamp has, but it shows that you can get more than just a panel from a cover plate die. Then I took it a step further and I cut larger circles from the center of each panel and I switched them, so you get a bit of both panels on each card. The first one is backed with white and finished with a wonderful die cut from Catherine Pooler, and the second one has a layer of black underneath for a higher contrast look. Both cards have more of the Crafty Meraki gems on them. As a bonus, I embossed this cover plate by changing the sandwich from my die cutting machine to include a rubber embossing mat, and you can see that you get a gorgeous textured panel for yet another look. I added those little cutout circles from the leftovers of my colored panels, and I added just the little thanks sentiment from Round of Thanks, cut out from its circular frame. The 2 questions that help me determine if I really need to buy something are, number 1, will having this exact new product make a difference to the recipient of my card? We tend to be creatures of habit, and we're attracted to the similar items again and again. Often we have something already that we can use to get a similar look. My previous cards were examples of this, and it also works with my limes process. The second question is, will having this product help me use something that I already have in a new or different way? Or will it make my card making better or easier in some way? This applies especially to new tools, but here's an example with a stamp and die set. In her latest release, Catherine had circles and dotted circle dies, along with this rounded sentiment set. As you know, I already have my Essentials by Ellen Essential Circles and Essential Circles for Stitching dies, which come in even more sizes than the set Catherine released, so I didn't need the dies, but these rounded sentiments are a really fun addition to what I already have to get more from my circle dies. They're designed to work with a particular size circle, so I grabbed the appropriate one from my set and all the smaller circles. I lined them up, taped them together so they would act as a single die, just like my happy word in the first card, and I ran them through my die cutting machine with a panel of white cardstock. The Essentials by Ellen circles cut out frames as well as the circles, so I separated them since I want color only on the thicker circle pieces and not on the narrow frames. Here's my water media mat yet again. I find it really useful for blending ink onto die cuts. This time I blended a lighter color all over, then masked off about half of each piece before blending a darker shade. This allowed me to get a full rainbow of colors on these pieces, and it's just a fun way to add a bit of interest. I also cut one of the circles from white cardstock to act as my base. I coated it with adhesive and then placed each of the rings on top until I had it fully glued together. I grabbed one of the panels I had cut the circles from and I put it in my mini MISTI, lined up the rounded birthday sentiment, and then stamped it with black ink. To finish this one, I added a larger black circle behind my white panel. I thought it would add interest by emphasizing the circle motif on this card. I edged the white panel with Stardust stickles and finished with some magic crystal gems. We see the new goodies and we want them. I get it. Believe me, I get it. We're all different in our styles, experience levels, and current inventory, so our purchasing decisions will also be different. But hopefully these examples and the 2 questions can make your decision-making process a little easier. What products do you have a hard time resisting? Let me know in the comments below. For me, it's well-designed word dies and pretty much anything geometric. Now it's time to click this link to head to Justine for more ideas about resisting new releases. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.